Hi, I'm Deanna Springer.
And I'm Dana Casey with another fun Stitch It Sisters sewing project and time-saving tips from Nancy Zieman.
First, let's look at the project we're making today. We'll be making the Dresden Columns table runner made from Riley Blake shades and our Dresden Columns table runner pattern.
This is a modern twist on the first quilt block I ever made, the Dresden plate.
And we've turned the design on its side. We've taken the Dresden wedges and seamed them together to make the Dresden column. To make the Dresden Columns table runner, we're going to cut some Crosswise fabric strips.
What's a Crosswise fabric strip?
Good question. Crosswise fabric strips are cut the width of the fabric. Even though these strips are different widths, they're all the same length because we cut them across the fabric. So they're all about 42 inches long.
Time-saving measuring.
Right. We'll need 5 different fabrics. We're using the light green as a background fabric, and then we have 4 different mediums. So 5 6 1/4 inch strips. And we also need 5 2.5 inch strips. This is also made from the background, cut from the background fabric, so these will be used for background strips. We also need 2 2.5 inch blue strips and 3 1.5 inch fuchsia strips.
Okay.
In addition to the Crosswise fabric strips, we'll cut some squares. 3 2.5 inch for the background and 4 2.5 inch assorted mediums. We'll also be cutting some Dresden wedges. Included with the Dresden Columns table runner pattern is a Dresden template that you'll need for this project. And you could trace this or photocopy it onto cardstock, which we did. And we're going to be doing some tracing. But first, let's share a tip I learned from Nancy Zieman. We're going to stack our 6 1/4 inch Crosswise fabric strips so that we have one stack.
A great time saver.
Because we can trace all our wedges at once. And rotate. And just butt it up to the line and continue down the column.
So by rotating your template, you have 0 waste.
0 waste, because the next step after you trace all your wedge shapes is taking it to the cutting mat. And you'll use a straight ruler and a rotary cutter to cut out all your wedges. So you have an assortment of wedges, and this is where you can be a designer. That center column can be assembled in any color order. Randomly place the wedges together, right sides together, aligning the cut edge. We will go to the sewing machine and stitch a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance right where I put that pin. On each end, you can see that the fabric is angled, but once we sew that seam and press it open, it will be a straight column.
It's like magic.
Right, the magic Dresden Columns table runner. So you'll continue on down, stitching and pressing and adding your columns, your Dresdens to make a column. This is what the back of the column looks like when the seams are pressed open, and then we have an entire column of Dresden.
Hence the Dresden column table runner.
And no, it's not called a Dresden plate quilt. The next step in our Dresden table runner is to make the floating squares column. We're going to gather our squares together in one background 2.5 inch strip, and we're going to create the column. I've cut just a little bit of one of the columns, and we're going to attach a blue floating square to it. So we're putting it right sides together, stitching and pressing open. And you'll continue to join the columns together, join the squares together into a column, that is, by placing right sides together, sewing a scant 1/4 inch seam, pressing it open. So you'll continue down the column, stitching opening, stitching, opening. So when you have all your squares sewn together, you'll add a longer background fabric to the end of your square strata, which will create the floating squares column. When you have all your columns ready, you're going to assemble the table topper. We'll put a 2.5 inch square, 2.5 inch rectangle to our floating squares column, and we'll sew it right sides together with a scant 1/4 inch seam. We'll press it open, and we'll continue to add more columns. And through the magic of slanty board, we're able to virtually sew these columns together. We'll add a fuchsia. We'll add the Dresden column. Another background strip. A nice blue accent strip. Another fuchsia strip. And another background fabric strip. So once all of these are sewn together, we're going to trim all of them to 39 inches so that they're all the same length.
So then it doesn't matter if you're off a little bit on the edges or the ends because you're going to trim it anyway, so they're all flush.
Another tip I've learned from Nancy Zieman is trim it after you sew it. So your top and your bottom can be a little bit uneven on each column, but you'll trim it just before finishing it. So we'll bring out the finished Dresden table topper. This one is already sewn. And we've machine quilted this. And this is a wonderful project for using the Ultimate Quilt and Stitch presser foot. It has an adjustable guide built in. You can set it, and it locks into place for any measurement between 3/8 of an inch and 3 inches. It's a super slick foot that doesn't drag on the fabric. It has a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on the foot. So I echo quilted each one of the Dresden columns. I worked from the center out. Echo quilting just means I followed the foot along the edge of each fabric, stitching a 1/4 inch on the inside of each Dresden wedge. It was fun to make progress and work from the center out. On the columns, I did parallel line stitching in alignment with the column edges.
So no need for a ruler and a pen to make lines and then stitch over the line.
Right, not with the Ultimate Quilt and Stitch presser foot. No marking. A lot of quilts, you can machine quilt them through a lot of markings. There are 0 markings for machine quilting on this because I used the fabric, the design for the echo quilting and the straight line machine quilting.
That's neat, and it really gives it dimension.
It adds dimension, and I think the machine, it's a beautiful project before the machine quilting, but it really brings it all together after the machine quilting. And this Dresden column table topper is great on the table, but you can also turn it on its side, and it makes a great wall hanging.
Fantastic. These shades are so beautiful, and they go very nicely together.
They really do. The Dresden Columns Table Runner pattern is available at stitchitsisters.com. Choose a fabric collection that features a variety of lights, mediums, and darks.
We've also assembled a limited number of Stitch It Sisters bundle boxes that include the Riley Blake shades that we're using today and the Dresden Columns Table Runner pattern.